Hey everyone, Kane from VividChim here, and 2020 has been an admittedly weird year for video games, with more delays than your average airport, but as we've gotten further and further into this year, some of those delayed games have since come out, with today's game actually being no exception, and with many people already claiming it to be an all-time classic. But is it? Well, why don't you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button and the bell if you're feeling extra lovely, and sit back as we ask Ghost of Tsushima, how bad can it be? The story of Ghost of Tsushima takes place in 1274, when a Mongol invasion, led by Khotan Khan, lands on the titular island. We play as Jin of Clan Sakai, a samurai who is part of the forces standing up against the Mongols at Komoda Beach, a fight which doesn't go too well as the samurai lose, with our uncle, Lord Shimura, being captured. Jin, surviving two certain death scenarios, goes on a journey to save Tsushima, making new allies and adopting new fighting techniques to ensure their survival, becoming what the people of the island are calling the Ghost in the process. It was around the end of Act 1 where I actually started to get into Ghost's story, as honestly, everything between that opening sequence and the final mission of the first act kinda started to lose me at points. Some parts I just didn't care, other parts I didn't find very gripping, but overall it is a genuinely fantastic narrative experience, probably the best one I've had in 2020, if not the last couple of years. That's not to say I'm happy with everything surrounding the main plot though, as there is one major problem with Ghost of Tsushima. It made me feel lied to. I remember before this game came out that there was a lot of focus on the fact that there were two ways to play this game. You could play it as Jin, the honourable samurai, or the dishonourable ghost. The issue is, that's not really true. The game's narrative is heavily based around Jin's journey into becoming the Ghost, which is fine, and again, I want to clarify I think it's a brilliant story. It just comes at the expense of that honourable samurai playstyle they talked so much about. It's honestly completely pointless to play Ghost of Tsushima that way, because you realistically can't. The game pigeonholes you into playing as the Ghost, and there are unavoidable sequences where you need to do dishonourable things, so that second playstyle they hyped up really doesn't exist. It's just the Ghost, but more difficult, and with no reward for that increased difficulty. Cutscenes still talk about you as the Ghost and fighting without honour, even when you aren't playing that way at all, aside from the occasions where the game forces you. To me, if the protagonist's approach to combat is the entire crux of your narrative, and you have specifically discussed there being two distinct approaches prior to release, make both of those combat styles equally important, or the easier way, just be clear that the samurai approach doesn't actually make a difference to the narrative. I didn't find this out until my second playthrough because all indicators were pointing towards it changing the outcome. And we're about to get into some spoilers for the end of the game here, so I'm going to put this text on screen that says spoiler warning, so if you want to avoid them entirely, skip until that disappears, and we're not actually going to show any correlating footage, it's just going to be B-roll, so once that disappears, either unmute the video or just skip to that point. There isn't even a separate ending for playing this way in Ghost of Tsushima. The ending is a choice. Do you spare or kill Lord Shimura? One is honourable, the other isn't. That's it. And while I think the story is beautifully done, I feel like not giving us the choice would have been the way to go. If we fully invested into being the Ghost, be dishonourable, and if we frankly wasted our time playing the samurai way, pick the honourable one for us. That way the samurai style would have some purpose. Now I do want to say that I don't think you should take away from this game because of this little fact at all. It's more of an issue with the marketing surrounding the product than it is the product itself. It's just that I think it's a criticism worth mentioning because, well, nobody else has, quite frankly. Everyone else has genuinely just ignored it, whereas I think it's a fair criticism to make of the narrative experience, and also it's just a tad dishonest and scummy for them to be a bit misleading in that regard. There was also something amusing that I wanted to discuss, as I can't really tell whether it was deliberate or not, but all of the footage you've been seeing here is with the Japanese audio and English subtitles. Now, if you're wondering why you can still read their lips, that's because the facial animations are only that of the English voiceover cast, meaning we have a reverse of the traditional bad lip sync from samurai and kung fu movies. I have no idea if this was intentional, but it is something that I thought I'd mention because it's pretty jarring at times, and I think kind of detracted from the experience a little bit when playing it with the Japanese VO. Finally, before we wrap up this long segment, I want to talk about the incredible side stories in this game. All of them are just fantastic, with engaging plots and well thought out characters. My personal favourites are the Yamato stories, where he tells you a tale about some legendary item for you to get, and my personal favourite side quest of all time as of writing this script, the Yuriko stories. Absolutely brilliant, all of them. Ghost of Tsushima is the most stylish game I've ever played. It knows its theme and it is not afraid to show it off. Now, I am playing this on standard PS4 hardware and not a PS4 Pro, and you can tell because the difference is quite drastic overall when you're looking for this sort of thing. If you aren't specifically trying to pay attention to it though, you aren't really going to notice because the overall image of this game is extraordinary. All the colours and settings are just beautiful, helped along with that incredible flair that this game has to the nines. The perfect example of this is every time you get into a duel. Firstly, the duel settings are chef's kiss. Combat rings with leaves, water and whatever else. They just make you feel like a badass. But then the cutscene leading into the duel, that's the best part of this entire game. A wide shot opens with both fighters either side and a title down the center of frame. We cut to a low angle shot of Jin staring down his enemy, all the focus on them until they decide to draw their blade. Then the focus shifts to Jin, larger than the frame itself to convey your presence and power as the player. The enemy stares them down, but Jin remains completely unfazed. A close-up on the enemy's hand hovering before a close-up on Jin, calmly grabbing his katana from his side, and then... perfection. Every time, without fail, this gave me chills. The game gets it. It knows how to convey satisfaction, tension, and power, all through a handful of shots, and it does it better than most video games. And it doesn't even stop at the duels. You can look at every single cutscene in this game, and you are guaranteed to have at least one shot that makes you go, damn, that looks fantastic. Then you have how incredible this game sounds on top of all of that. The soundtrack and audio design of Ghost of Tsushima is just stunning, and there wasn't a single second of this game where it felt out of place or distracted me outside of the weird lip sync thing. It genuinely enhanced every aspect of this game. So recently we made a video on Horizon Zero Dawn, which you should definitely watch by the way, and in that video we said the following. I'm sure this is going to make some people mad, but if you've played a Sony exclusive over the last generation and a half, you know what you're getting into when it comes to Horizon Zero Dawn. Third person, action adventure, open world, collectibles, upgrades, crafting, climbing, stealth, occasionally by tall grass, and something else I'm probably missing too. And as I'm sure some of you can imagine, that all still applies here. The stealth is identical, the climbing and parkour is similar, but I actually do think they both have their highs and lows. The grapple and ability to climb anything in reach is a highlight of Ghost's approach to traversal, whereas the actual designated climbing areas of marked rocks and ledges are mostly just kind of bad in my opinion. They feel really clunky to use with a pace that's just not appealing at all when compared to just going around the cliff 9 times out of 10. But that doesn't mean it's all bad, because Ghost of Tsushima, like Horizon and all of these games, brings its own flair to that formula which really makes it stand out as its own product. Ghost's combat has the opposite approach to Horizon Zero Dawn, for example, where Horizon has a large focus on ranged combat with a simple yet still fun melee system on the side. Ghost puts all of its focus in the swordplay that you will spend most of the game experiencing, with a more basic ranged combat experience adjacent to it that, while not as in-depth as the melee aspects, does have a wide variety of tools thanks to the ghost weapons you collect throughout your playthrough. Ghost of Tsushima's combat has the perfect pace, slow enough to let the player focus and strategize about their approach, but fast enough to allow a player to find their flow and zone into the sometimes large encounters. Using the 4 different stances to target specific enemies, mixing your attacks and ghost weapons to efficiently pick them off with deliberate and calculated strikes, it's just really fun to get into fights in Ghost, and the odd occasion where the camera freaks out aside, It's smooth as silk. The duels are, yet again, the highlight though. Real tense tests of skill. It allows you to hyper-focus on a single enemy, turning the occasional chaos into a deadly game of chess, matching their moves with parries, dodges and stagger attacks to chip them down until you can land the killing blow. Always a challenge and a genuine highlight for me. The duels of Ghost of Tsushima are the perfect example of the love and care put into this game by Sucker Punch. The narrative impact that they bring, the style and presentation of each individual duel, and the peak of this game's combat. The duels of Ghost of Tsushima draws from all of the highs that it has to offer and combines them into what is essentially an entertainment masterclass for video games. Ghost of Tsushima is the best video game I've played in 2020 so far. It brings in elements of all the highlights of this past generation of video games and puts them together in a stylish and flair-filled package, and whilst it's not perfect or flawless, it uses its strengths to minimize and hide the genuine problems that it does have, some of which aren't even on the dev team themselves. What did you think of Ghost of Tsushima though? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Obviously hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when the next one is released. I've been Kane from VividChim, and I'll see you all soon.